Hello, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about Dune 2021, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Now, I'm a fan of Denis' work. Blade Runner 2049 is one of those movies that made me want to study film and become a filmmaker one day. You know, he was able to take this big and expensive world that could be the new, like intimidating for a newcomer, and just make it feel very personal and character driven. And he made it very, very interesting to me. It kept me engaged throughout the entire runtime, despite the slow pace of his work. That's something that can be seen throughout all of his films. Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, even this. They all feel similar. They all feel the same way. And it's impossible to explain the plot of this movie in any sort of concise way, because it is a big story with a lot of lore behind it. It's just not possible. It's not possible. And it sounds very, very confusing when you try to speedrun it. So I know this because I tried to do it. I have another version of this recording where I did try and explain the plot of Dune and a bunch of things that surround it, and it came out incoherent. It was not usable in any way or shape or form. So this is going to be more of a plea onto why you should see it, and I'm not really going to get into the plot of it because I don't know how to approach that. That is something out of my skill set, because there is so much story here that if I tried to explain any of it, we would be here for the entire runtime of this movie. What I will say is that the basic plot of this movie revolves around Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet. His family is being ordered to take care of the desert planet Arrakis, which was once overtaken by a very oppressive group named the Harkonnens, but they get booted. So now Paul's family has to go in and take their place. Meanwhile, the desert people on Arrakis, known as the Fremen, are a little bit unsure about, having someone new take over their land that is not one of their own. That is about all I can say regarding the plot of this without getting into spoilers or starting to make it confusing. And even then, I don't think I did a very good job of explaining what this movie is exactly about. And that's, like I said, it's impossible. It's just not possible for me to explain what this movie is about in, that short little spiel. I can't imagine what the fucking log line of this movie is. A log line is just like a 1 or 2 sentence summary of what the movie is about, to try and sell it or try and get people interested in it. I don't know what that could be. I have no idea. Maybe what I said was about as close as you can get to that. Dune is based on a novel. It's a 1965 novel by Frank Herbert. And for a long time, it was thought to be unfilmable. Jodorowsky tried to make his version of Dune, but that didn't happen. David Lynch made his version of Dune, but it was confusing and not very well received by anyone. It's a version that I haven't seen, but I'm very, very interested in it, and I might do a reaction to it at some point because I really want to know how that compares to this one, and if I can still follow the story along in that adaptation. So for a long time, this book was considered, unfilmable. There's just so much lore, so much story. It's just, no, it's not. It probably was never going to happen. So that's why when Denis Villeneuve approached this project, he took the first book and he split it into 2. That's why there's Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2, both taking place. I don't think he cut it in half. I think like Part 1 covers more of the book than Part 2. I haven't read it. I need to read it. I understand. But from what I know, he split the book up, which I think is very, very smart of him, because there is no way you can adapt this entire book into one coherent movie that isn't like 12 hours long. You know what I mean? And so, this movie is like 2.5 hours long, and it takes its time. Like I said, it feels like a Denis Villeneuve movie. It feels like a slow burn, but at the same time, it is an emotional story. And he makes sure that every aspect of the world feels important to our main characters. We are always looking at the world through Paul's eyes, what he's feeling, what he's seeing. And it takes, by doing so, he takes this very difficult to understand world and makes it very, very digestible because you understand its importance to the characters. It's character first. So it's like the lore could be very, very daunting, right? So it's like, okay, there's the desert planet Arrakis, right? And on the desert planet, there is this, I'm going to call it space drug. It's a space drug known as spice. And spice is the most valuable resource on the planet. So, of course, when someone is ruling over Arrakis, they want to mine as much of that as possible without any sort of care towards the native Fremen that are living on the planet. Just me saying that should probably start up something in your brain where it's like, okay, that sounds very, very familiar to something going on in our real world, and I will get to that. And we understand how powerful the spice on Arrakis is because we see what Paul sees when he's, hit by a wave of spice during a kind of a hectic scene. We start seeing like all these visions and glimpses into the future and all of this, and it really puts you in that mindset where it's like, oh, this is what that feels like. This is what we're seeing. This is how this is how crazy this is. And I think even from like a visual perspective, this movie everything feels tangible and it feels real. There's a lot of visual effects here. It's a sci-fi movie. But you wouldn't be able to tell that it's CGI just by looking at it because everything in this movie feels real. Of course, it's not things that actually exist. There is no dragonfly helicopter. There are no sandworms. There are no, there's none of that. But the film is able to blend its CGI elements so perfectly with the film itself that it's actually jaw-dropping. It is very, 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 very immersive, I should say. It's very, very stunning. When we get in films now, like big budget action films releasing like every weekend, it's very, very hard to be like dazzled by good visual effects. So when I say that every single visual effect in this movie looks incredible and feels real, that is a huge compliment. It is jaw-dropping and stunning. I genuinely don't know how they did any of it, and I don't even think I want to know because I don't want to ruin, that magic for myself. But this is not a action film by any means. It is like I said, it's a slow burn, and it's very character-driven, very character-focused. The first hour or so, there is like no action. It's just all world building and what that world building means to our characters and what their experiences are and what that's like. There is action in here, but they're only in places where it needs to be. There's no like, oh, this is running on a little too long. We need to put like a fight scene in here. None of that. But when it is in the film, it does feel like life or death for our characters. And this, the film is a slower pace, so we spend more time getting to understand the emotions of our characters and their whole motivations, and they start to feel real. So when the action scenes do start up in the back half of the film, it means something to us, and it keeps us engaged. And speaking of keeping us engaged, this is a movie that you need to see in a theater. And I know I'm recording this after the re-release has already ended, so I want to apologize. for that. I would have gotten this out earlier, but I didn't. I don't have any excuses. But this is a movie that is built for that theater experience, especially from an audio perspective. There's a lot of moments this is a very loud film, very, very loud. There is an aspect to this film that is supposed to be loud and disorienting. But you don't get that from a home experience unless you have a really, really good high-end sound system, which I doubt you have. I don't mean to call you poor or anything, but I don't even have that. But there is, you need that disorienting nature of the audio for that particular effect to work. Watching it at home, that just doesn't translate to being the same, that it doesn't translate to being the same effect. You need it to be loud and bassy, and you need that strong surround sound system to make it seem like the sound is surrounding you. Even from a score perspective, you want that score to be loud because it's inherently tied to the emotions of our characters. Without Again, without going into plot details that'll make you confused, it is it is very, very tied to what our characters are feeling and, thinking in a particular moment without, actually having them say it. I'm going to be talking about IMAX. Once more, I feel like every single review I've ever done on this channel has been about IMAX in some way, or the IMAX format in some way. There are scenes that are, I don't want to say shot in full frame IMAX, because it's different from the cameras used in Nope and in Oppenheimer. But there are sequences in here that do have a taller aspect ratio if you see it in an IMAX theater. It does go to the full big frame IMAX. I'll probably put an image up on screen here. It's used, and I believe that it's used extremely well in this movie, and it's not just a gimmick. It enhances the film. It is the definitive way to watch it. And of course, the IMAX sequences aren't in, the entire thing. There are scenes that are just in regular standard scope, but the IMAX sequences are used a lot in the back half of the film. Without getting into spoilers, the way it's used helps enhance this feeling of hopelessness. There's a lot of wide shots in the back half of the film where our characters are kind of just in the middle of the desert, the open desert of Arrakis. And it makes our characters look very, very small compared to the world that surrounds them. And it just really enhances that feeling of isolation that you get from watching it. That's something that you do get in the scope version. I'm not going to lie to you. You can still understand that there's our characters are like little dots on the screen with a bunch of desert surrounding them. But when you watch that IMAX version, just having the extra height, the extra 40% or whatever screen really, really does, make the characters look even smaller. They look pretty much like you can't even really see them. All you see is the desert and you see these little dots moving. And it just really makes you go like, oh shit. You know what I mean? It's incredibly immersive and very visually stunning. But on top of that, it does heighten that emotion and it does heighten the tension of the overall film. And of course, that's something that you can't see at home because they don't release the IMAX footage on the home release. So I'm sorry. Hopefully they do another re-release soon. Because that is, the definitive way of watching it. But the IMAX format is also used a lot for the action scenes. In them, our main characters are shown as small or on the ground. But it also enhances the scale of the film and who has, more power. The opening scene is like an enemy ship kind of attacking the native Fremen on Arrakis, right? And just having this big ship just tower over, the other people on the ground gives you the idea of how oppressed the native Fremen are on Arrakis. And this film is, about colonialism and oppression. You could compare spice to oil or gold or indigenous people living on sacred land that people just want to take over for their own financial gain. It does have a lot of commentary about what is going on in our real world. Probably the most interesting aspect of this story, and I guess this could be, this could trace back to the original Frank Herbert novel, is that we are not following the point of view of the native Fremen on Arrakis. We are following the point of view of an outsider. And, there's a bunch of films out there, a bunch of stories out there, that do kind of fall into this danger about the white savior trope, where it's like, oh, we're an oppressed group, but, this white man's going to come in and save all of us from from the dangers of the outside and from the dangers of his own people. You can say that about Dances with Wolves. You can say that about Avatar. These are all films that I'm a big fan of, by the way. But this film does not take that approach. There is no white savior in Dune. We start from the point of view of the Fremen on Arrakis, and it immediately makes it clear that they are the heart of the film. And like I said, we were immediately shown the horrors the Harkonnens commit. I talked about the giant ship that attacks the Fremen in the first scene. And by having that scene be what opens the entire film, it immediately makes us sympathize with them. And it sets up that conflict while also making it clear that the Fremen don't think their lives can be any better. The last line of that opening is, who will our next oppressors be? It makes it clear that this is what they think their lives are going to be like. There is no getting better. This is just their reality. And even though they aren't the main characters, having that opening be all from the Fremen's point of view, it helps add to the point of why we're following Paul, why we're following people that are not natives to Arrakis. It creates that hopeful image that maybe Paul and his family can make a better future on Arrakis for everyone. Even though you know deep down that that probably isn't true because of how hopeless and bleak that opening is. But it does still have that hopeful nature surrounding it. And that hopeful nature, is kind of shared by the other people on Arrakis. People see Paul Atreides and his family and they think they're the ones who will, lead us to safety. Paul himself is being called the one by the Fremen. And, the film even asks that question, is there even a one? Is there someone that could lead Arrakis to a better future? Or are they just being, told to see this Messiah that will lead them, to freedom? Or will Paul and his family just be another oppressive figure for the Fremen? It does ask those questions. And, opening the film from the point of view of the Fremen and, how how shitty their lives are, we have those opening horrors in the back of our mind throughout the entire runtime. There is that image where it's like, oh, it cannot get any worse for them. This is about as awful as it could get. And it makes us question, like, where can they go from here? Is there any outsider that could make their lives better? Or is it just this never-ending cycle of oppression? And I feel like that is, like I said, the most interesting aspect of this film is the way it approaches these themes and it asks these really hard-hitting questions. But behind all the lore and behind all the story and behind all the visual effects, the most interesting part of the film is its themes. It's the way that it approaches its messages. And I think having its themes be so tied to the real world helps make it easier as an audience member to understand what is going on. It makes it more engaging. It makes the Fremen more appealing as characters, and it makes, everyone else, all the outsiders, look inherently more despicable because we do have, real life counterparts to compare them to. I think sci-fi is always supposed to be at least a little bit reflective, if not overtly reflective of, real world events or real world tragedies or real world themes. And that is, of course, obviously, I spent the majority of this review talking about that. And I think that is what Dune does so well and why I think it's such an interesting story. While a lot of that can be, applied to the book as well or credited to the book, I think the way that Villeneuve handles it from a filmmaking perspective is very, very interesting and unique. We immediately cut from the opening point of view of the Fremen. Immediately we cut to Paul right after the line of who will our next oppressors be, and it just cuts to Paul. It creates, that it just shows the theme of the movie right there. That is the message of the whole film, and you just have that little editing moment right there in the back of your mind the entire time. It's not a hopeful movie by any means for anyone, and I think that it fits the message perfectly. That sort of more dour tone of this whole thing. But yeah, it is a difficult film to explain. But I do think that this is probably as good of an adaptation of this source material that you can get. I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing Dune Part 2. I will have a review up for that whenever I see it, or when I see it this Sunday, actually, 25th. So I'll probably have that up sometime the next week, maybe even a week from now. But that's going to be it, I think. Yeah, that's going to be it. I'm hoping that when I watch this footage back, it's more coherent than the other version that I recorded. It came out to be around the same recording time for both. So hopefully, hopefully this is a little bit better. But yeah, if you have any interest in seeing Dune, I'd say you should 100% give it a shot. If you have any interest in seeing Dune Part 2, see it in the theater because, this was built for the theater experience. And I'm sure Part 2 will be as well. And I'm sorry once again that I couldn't get this review up before the Dune Part 1 re-release got pulled from theaters. So see it on the best screen that you can, I guess, with the best sound system that you can. Hopefully you have a surround sound system in your home. It's the best I can hope for and the best I can say for you. But yeah. I do think that this film, for all of its lore, I do think it does a great job of condensing it and making it easily digestible for an audience. And thematically, I do think it is very, very engaging. So yeah, please, it's a great film. Please go and check it out. Well, that's going to be it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.